In Path of Exile, before you're able to do this, or this, it all starts here, at the beginning. Hello guys, it's Hypnotic here. Welcome to my beginner's guide for Path of Exile. Now there's a lot of new people checking out Path of Exile, whether that's genuine interest in the game or that they just want to escape the sinking ship that is Blizzard and Diablo. I don't know. However, this game is notorious for being fairly complex, and I figured today I would make a video just showing the fundamentals and what you can learn to get started in Path of Exile. Now, obviously, this beginner's guide will not be the shortest video in the world, and it also will not be 7 hours long, so you don't have to worry about trudging through a Lord of the Rings trilogy to get the information that you need to get through the game. My approach personally, I will share information that I feel is essential. I will sprinkle a couple of tips and tricks along the way. It's going to be a doozy, so let's get into it. When you create your character or any character in the future, you will be presented with this screen. Now this screen shows the standard league, which is the league that everything is funneled into once each league ends, as well as the current league and the hardcore variation of it. As well, in subsections, we have Solo Self-Found, which is solo play and no trading. And we also have Ruthless, which we will not get into. Do not start Ruthless. Do not do it. Now, I have seen a lot of questions from people wondering if they should start in the current Challenge League or in Standard. Now, this generally would be people that have started, a month or two into the league, and they're wondering if it's worth starting the new season with it ending soon. Now, in this case, it's Crucible League. When Crucible League ends, it will get migrated to Standard. So anything that you do in Crucible League will be migrated to Standard, so you don't have to worry about losing your progress. Standard in itself is sort of a Frankenstein of years and years of economies filtering in crazy items, outrageous prices, small player base. Therefore, I don't really recommend you start with Standard as a new player. I would recommend the current Challenge League. Personally, I would recommend you start with Trade League so that you can get used to trading with other players. Now, the next step will be creating your character based on the class that you want to play. In the description below, I will list 3 beginner-friendly build guides that you can follow. You can choose whichever one you wish to play. Each build I'll be listing will not only have an in-depth guide to the build, but also to the game, so you can learn things that way. Now, for this particular video, I will be following Pohx's Righteous Fire Juggernaut guide, which is fantastic for a beginner. I will be following Pohx's Righteous Fire Juggernaut guide because it is a fantastic build for a new player and can even work on console with no issues. Personally, I'm going to choose my character name with reverse psychology in mind. I will also have an Arc Witch and a Toxic Rain Champion build that you can follow in the description, and they are built with a beginning player in mind, so if you want to follow those, you can do so. All right, the first thing you're going to want to do when you start, put your default attack on move only, because you don't want to be attacking monsters when you're trying to move. You will end up stopping and getting hit and getting killed. So I highly recommend having move on your left click. Now, when you've killed this first zombie, you'll have a skill gem dropped based on the class that you've chosen. In the Marauder's case, it'll be Heavy Strike. Each skill in Path of Exile is linked to a skill gem, and there is also supporting gems as well, such as increased damage or reduced mana cost. We will go over gem sockets and links in a little bit here, but first just pick up your gem and equip it. You'll want to make sure that you put the corresponding gem into the colored socket that it matches. Now this chest will drop you your first support gem. This gem will interact with your main skill to either make it stronger, make it attack faster, etc. Now these support gems will not work unless they're linked to your main skill, so if you're going to attach it to something like Heavy Strike, make sure that they're linked. In case of this Ruthless support, in basic terms, every third attack will do more damage, and there will also be a 20% mana cost multiplier with it to make your skill stronger, but also make it cost more mana. You'll see a little box to the left of the support gem that indicates that it's able to support the skill that it shows. Now at the end of Twilight Strange, you'll find a monster named Hillock. He's a mini boss of the area. As long as you keep your mana topped up and use your main skill, you shouldn't have too many issues. He does get a little bit stronger once he pulls the sword out of him, but you have a club, and obviously clubs beat sword. Now, once you've killed him, he'll drop a bunch of loot, and you'll also get a level and a passive point. Now, unfortunately, this is the part of the game about 2 minutes in where the majority of people will probably quit, and that's because I'm going to introduce the passive tree. You can access this by clicking the little button that comes up when you level up or hitting P on your keyboard. Now, obviously, this tree upon first inspection may be a little bit overwhelming to some people. However, each class has its own starting area, and that doesn't change based on the class that you choose. Now, the best way I can make this a little less overwhelming for you is that the travel nodes aren't necessarily super important, at least at the start of the game. The important thing are the medium-sized notables as well as the larger keystones. Now, if you follow your guide and you focus on the notables and the keystones that you're aiming for, you'll find it a lot less overwhelming. For example, this dexterity, intelligence, movement speed, and accuracy rating notable, you'll have to take all these travel nodes to get to it. And by the time you get there, you'll be level 9. So as long as you focus on those, it's not so bad. The important thing with travel nodes is that you take something that benefits you and not spend a lot of points on them. But luckily for you, you were smart enough to be following a guide, so you'll have everything laid out for you in a nice, neat fashion. Now, you made it to the first town in the game, and I'm going to share a tip with you. This particular tip is for movement speed boots. You can go to the vendor here and type in runners to look for boots that will give you movement speed. And the vendors do refresh every level, so make sure you check for those if you decide to do so. Alright, so in this vendor window, we're going to look for sockets and links. And here we have a padded vest, evasion energy shield base with a blue, green linked sockets. Depending on the base that you get, armor bases will be more likely to have red sockets, evasion bases will be more likely to have green sockets, and energy shield bases will be more likely to have blue sockets. Now in this case, this has evasion rating and energy shield, therefore it has blue and green socket. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any other stats, but the important thing is the sockets, the links. Okay, we've just left the first main town. There's two things I want to go over. The first thing is to go at your own pace. Now, obviously, people come from different backgrounds, whether they've played ARPGs, whether they've played, video games in general, whether they're beginner, intermediate, or advanced. The important thing is that you take this game at your own pace. Try your best not to be overwhelmed by everything that this game has to offer. It does have a lot to offer. The important thing is to learn as much as you can, but obviously don't overwhelm yourself because that doesn't make the game fun. Now, between this fork in the road, you'll come across a waypoint. Waypoints are essentially fast travel. Now, another tip I have for you guys, some optional side quests are a good source of free respec points that you can use on your passive tree. Now, during the video, I'm going to cover some of the currency in Path of Exile. I'm going to introduce currencies a few at a time just to not overwhelm you. First one being the Wisdom Scroll. This is the most basic currency in Path of Exile. Portal Scrolls will create a portal to bring you back to the town that you left. Next up, we have Blacksmith Whetstones. These will increase the quality on your weapons to a maximum of 20%. As well, we have Armor Scraps that will bring the quality of your armor up to a maximum of 20%. Now, for the most part, these don't have much of a use. You can sell them for Wisdom Scrolls if you're finding that you're running low on them. Higher quality armor and weapons will roll more sockets or links when you get to that point. Next, we have the Orb of Transmutation. This will take a normal item and turn it into a magic item. Magic items are always better than white items. We have the Orb of Alteration. This will take a magic item and re-roll it to give it new properties. Alteration orbs are kind of underrated. You can roll your flasks for better mods. You can use them to roll certain jewels, and they're also easy to replenish because any identified magic or rare item will sell for alteration shards. We have the Orb of Augmentation. This will add a random modifier to a magic item that only has one modifier. Magic items can only have a maximum of 2 modifiers. Finally, we have the Chromatic Orb. This reforges the colors of sockets on an item. Now, depending on the base, you're more likely to get a certain color. As I covered earlier, armor is more likely to get red sockets, evasion is more likely to get green sockets, energy shield is more likely to get blue sockets. The best advice I can give you, make sure that it has a certain base that's more likely to roll those colors, and aim for those as opposed to off colors. Off colors get harder to hit the higher the requirements are for strength, dex, and int on the gear, so try not to waste your chromatics on 3 blues on an evasion base, for example. Unless it's hybrid, of course, because that'll make it easier. Now, at some point at the start of the game, if you've chosen to play the current league, you'll run into the league mechanic. Now, some league mechanics are static here, like Crucible. Others, you'll have to kill certain monsters, etc. Whether you choose to interact with this while leveling is up to you. Again, as I said earlier, it's about going at your own pace and not overwhelming yourself because that won't make the game fun for you. Now, in the lower prison here, you'll find your first Trial of Ascendancy. Trials of Ascendancy are basically the start of a character upgrade. In the case of the class that I chose, which is the Marauder, we'll have the choice between 3 classes, which is the Juggernaut, the Berserker, or the Chieftain. Now, you'll have to do 6 of these before you're actually able to ascend, so whether you choose to do them now, or you can come back once you've hit all the areas that actually have them, and do them in order is up to you. We will go more into lab trials further into the video. We are now fighting the end of Act 1 boss, which is Merveil. Prioritizing cold resistance will help mitigate the damage from her. I will cover the different resistances and what they mean later on. Alright, we just finished Act 1 and now we are into Act 2. At the end of the first few acts here, I'm going to show my gear just to give you an idea of what I'm using. Obviously at the end of Act 1, you're not going to have the best stuff, and you may even have some white items, and that's okay. Gear strength levels from weakest to strongest go from white to magic to rare, and depending on the item, unique. At this point, just worry about having all your gear slots filled with at least something. And no, you do not need this many Quicksilver flasks. I just like to zoom. Now, the next thing I want to go over is auras and mana reservation. You'll see here that this aura vitality has a flat reservation. Now, flat reservation auras will increase as you level. Now, that is different to something like Herald of Ash here, which is a flat 25%. Something like Herald of Ash will always be 25% mana reservation unless you have sources of mana reservation efficiency. We won't get into mana reservation efficiency in this video because is not important for a beginner. The important thing is that you don't use too many auras that you're not able to use your skills without running out of mana. Keep in mind that there are level requirements as well as attribute requirements when leveling gems. Additionally, if a gem is leveled and you don't want to continue leveling it, you can right click it so that it'll hide it and not level it. Next thing I want to cover is bandit rewards. Now in Act 2 there will be a quest where you'll have to either help or kill 3 bandits. Now each of these bandits, depending on whether you choose to help them or kill them, will give you a bonus. The too long didn't read portion of this is you will either help a Lyra or you will kill them all most of the time. Now if you happen to be following a build guide and you're not sure exactly what you should be doing for bandits, my personal default would be to kill them all. You'll get 2 passive points, and honestly 2 passive points is good for any class. Next quick tip here is about beasts. You'll run into these as you're playing. If you kill these with the help of Einhar, you can unlock crafts in the Menagerie, which is side content. Now, beasts are mainly used for mid to late game crafting, however, some low level ones such as a stack of fusing orbs, a low level unique, you can get those as well. Another tip here is in regards to fractured items. Fractured items are items that have 1 modifier locked in place regardless of how you craft it. Now, depending on the base and the mod that's been fractured items can end up being very valuable. I would recommend checking most fractured items as you're leveling. The next part here is in regards to unlocking the crafting bench. If you're just starting, you'll actually have to go to the Dread Thicket here in Act 3 to unlock your crafting bench. Now, we've hit the Act 2 boss, and here is him slamming me in the head multiple times and me not even being phased because the regen on this build is great. I'm clearly just more skillful than this guy. Alright, we're at the end of Act 2 and it's time for a gear check. Again, nothing crazy here. I've even been so lazy that I'm still using a white amulet, so we'll fix that really quick. Now, personally, I'm trying to stack fire resistance because my regen is based on my overcapped fire resistance. Now, obviously, you'd want your resistances more balanced out, but because I'm running this particular build, I prioritize fire resistance. This is the end of Act 2. It's time to go over a couple more currency items that you're likely to find in Path of Exile. The first one here is the Jeweler Orb. This will reforge the number of sockets on your gear. Now, depending on the type of gear, you can get 3 sockets like a wand, 4 sockets like a helmet, or 5 and 6 sockets on a body armor. The item level does matter as well, so the higher the item level, the more sockets that you can roll on it. Now, the Orb of Fusing, as the name suggests, allows you to fuse sockets on an item. These can be kind of hard to come by at the start. That's why it's important when items drop that have all their links that you use those as opposed to trying to force a 4-link. The next one here is the Orb of Alchemy. This will take any normal item and make it a rare item. Now these are pretty valuable whether it's to make normal gear rare or to use on maps in the end game. If you're starting out and you're throwing alchemy orbs at gear, I would recommend ones that have max sockets, max links, and a good base. Next one we have here is the Chaos Orb, which will take a rare and reforge it to give it new properties. You'll oftentimes be buying and selling with Chaos Orbs, especially at the start. I would not recommend using Chaos Orbs for anything other than buying and selling throughout the campaign. Regret Orbs, this will give you a refunded passive point that you can reallocate on your tree. Now, if you do a big build respec, you'll end up using a lot of Regret Orbs, which can cost you a lot of money. So it's best not to use these unless you absolutely need to, because you're going to need them at some point. Next, we have the Scouring Orb, which will make an item completely white from rare or magic. This can be good if you have a good base with maximum number of sockets and links, but just not the rolls that you want. You'll likely not use many of these at the start because you'll not have enough Alchemy Orbs and Scouring Orbs to sit there and craft your item all day. Next, I want to go over a basic resistance overview. Now, this is going to cover fire, cold, and lightning resistance. Chaos resistance is nice, especially in the late game. However, it's not necessary when you're leveling. The cap for these resistances, assuming no other outside influences, is 75. And there'll be 2 instances during the campaign where you'll lose 30 and 60 resistances respectively. Again, as I mentioned in this particular build, I get more life regen with cap fire res, so I'm focused on fire res as opposed to the other ones. Finding high res gear in combination with the crafting bench should be able to get you to your max cap res pretty easily. Speaking of which, this is the crafting bench. This will allow you to fill gaps in your gear. If you find a good base that's just missing some life, movement speed, a certain resistance, you can apply that here. Now, personally, I wouldn't go overboard with crafting everything because you're going to be replacing things a lot as you're leveling. So make sure to use the crafting bench sporadically when you need it. Next, we're going to talk about the library. Now, the library is a side quest in Act 3 that you can do, and once you've completed it, you can buy basically every skill gem in the game. You'll also have a side quest in Act 6 that does essentially the same thing. However, the NPC involved in that one will actually be able to go to your hideout so you can buy the gems from there. As well, with this particular quest, this NPC requires that you actually bring the orbs to him. Now, why doesn't it automatically take it out of your stash like every other NPC? Your guess is as good as mine. Side note, this is what a unique looks like when it drops, and this is what a unique looks like when it's terrible. Get used to it, there's a lot of them. Now that I've finished the library quest, I'm able to purchase the gems for my build and make the maximum use of the links and sockets that I have. It will also be around this time that you will be able to purchase the Purity of Elements aura. As a new player, I strongly recommend that you get this. The Purity of Elements aura will give you around 30% all res depending on the level of it, as well as element immunity. The next quick tip I have for you, essences can be used to make white items rare or reforge them at higher level. Now, essences will guarantee a mod based on its type, so something like a weapon, boots, gloves will all get different mods on the same essence. There's essentially no reason to use low-level essences on higher-level gear. I'm not even sure if you can do that. And try to make sure that you're spending essences first before alchemy orbs. Here's the end of Act 3 gear check. Obviously a terrible wand on the left hand. The right hand has plus to fire skills, kind of carrying the damage right now. Everything else, again, nothing crazy, just prioritizing the links and sockets, of course. Alright, excuse my transition into one of my other characters. This is more currency talk, and the 3 orbs that I want to show off I do not have yet. The first orb here is the Regal Orb. This one is fairly rare. You don't see it very often when you're leveling. Now with this orb you can upgrade a magic item to a rare item. I can't personally think of a scenario where you'd want to do this while leveling. The famed Exalted Orb. This augments a rare item with a new random modifier. It used to be the premier trading currency before GGG decided to change it to the Divine Orb. These go for around 15 chaos now if you're trading for them, and they can be useful if you want to finish off a craft to get lucky. Finally, we have the main trading currency, the higher level trading currency at Path of Exile, the Divine Orb. You may find one of these while you're going through the campaign, very unlikely, but you could find one. And if you do find one, do not use it. These are much too valuable for the average player to be throwing around. One of these is the equivalent to around 250 chaos. So if you get one of these, congratulations. Now that we've hit Act 4, if there's any Trials of Ascendancy that you haven't done yet, go back and do those. It should also be significantly easier to get through if you've waited this long to do them. And once you've done all your trials, you will be able to access the normal lab. As I said, the normal labyrinth is one of 4 labyrinths. When you finish this, you will get 2 Ascendancy points in the Ascendancy that you choose. Each starting class has 3 different ascendancies that you could choose from. Side note, if you want a quick tip for normal lab, going up and to the right will get you right to the end about 99% of the time. I basically never check the map with the first labyrinth. I go up and to the right as much as I can, and I end up finishing it. Now, here are the ascendancy class choices for the Marauder that I've chosen. For this particular build, I'm going to choose Juggernaut. So in this particular build guide, it's telling me to take Untiring. I feel like my life regen is good enough as it is, so I'm going to get this one later and instead go for Unflinching for the endurance charging. Ascendancies are huge power spikes, so make sure to do them as quickly as you can. The next tip I have for you is in regards to Delve. Delve is something you'll run into at the start of Act 4. You'll run into the NPC that runs it. It's side content, and it's a procedurally generated side content. I only recommend doing it at the end of the campaign. Alright, we have finished Act 4 and we are on to Act 5. Now I apologize, I do not have footage of my gear check for this because I had a random power outage on a sunny day, which made absolutely no sense. That being said, the next gear check will be a significant one because at the end of this act, we will get a -30 resistance penalty. The game also does get a little bit harder from Act 6 onwards, so we will talk about that when we get there. At this point, I've covered about 90% of the information that will help you get to the end of the campaign. At this point, moving forward, it'll just be random tips as well as gear progression. Next tip I have for you is in regards to Delirium. Now, Delirium is side content which generates delirious monsters. Killing them will fill a randomly assorted reward bar. Filling this and other bars multiple times will result in increased reward. Delirium can also drop Delirium-specific rewards such as Delirium Orbs. If you're a beginner player just leveling, it's nice for extra monsters and extra drops. However, the Delirium-specific drops you don't really need to worry about until the end of the campaign. Alright, now that we've hit the end of Act 5, you'll see a small cutscene that will bring your resistances down 30%. It will be at this point in Act 6 that you'll want to go over your gear. You want to make sure that your resistances are in order. If you're wearing any white items, make them at least magic, hopefully rare. It's basically just get more life, more resistances, make sure your sockets, gems, colors are all in order. And you also want to be looking into your flasks as well. In this case, I have my standard flasks, and I also have a granite flask, which gives me more armor. Something like a sulfite flask for more damage, granite for armor, jade for evasion, etc. You'll find these either dropping or in some cases sold in the vendor, and you can put those on if you need them. Another quick gear check for Act 8. Everything that I'm wearing is rare now except for the flasks, which can only roll magic. As you can see, I've utilized the crafting bench to add attributes to my gear where required. As you level your skill gems, you'll require more strength, dexterity, and intelligence. and crafting those is one way to get those attributes. If you're finding that attributes are a bit of an issue for you, you can also find plus 30 nodes on the tree. You can spec into those and then respec them as you need to. This will help you hit the attribute requirements to continue leveling your gem. And finally, we have hit the end of the campaign, and I have my final tip here I want to share with you in regards to passives. Now, once you finish the campaign, typing /passives will show you which passive point quests you've missed while you were playing. Now, make sure you don't use the /passive command prior to finishing the campaign, because it will only show you passive points you've finished as opposed to the ones you're missing. And finally, we have the end of campaign gear check. Again, nothing fancy here. I probably wouldn't start maps with this. It would depend on my resistances and my damage, etc. I would highly recommend going over your gear and tweaking what you need to before you start the end game, because we have another minus 30% to all of our resistances. Resistances will start getting a little bit harder to attain. And as far as the beginner guide goes, I believe that is everything that I want to cover. Eventually, I want to do an entry-level endgame guide as well. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you subscribe and stick around for that too. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, leave them in the description and I'll be happy to answer them. Anyways, I will see you on the next video.